Good morning. Thoughts from Philippians chapter 2, verses 19 to 30. Joy in friendship. As I'm sure you know, Paul's under house arrest in Rome. While he's there, he thinks about the churches that he's been involved with. He writes them letters. He prays for them. He wants to encourage them. And in this section, he tells the friends in Philippi that he's going to send one of his closest friends along to be able to encourage them and to find out how they're getting on. That friend is Timothy. He tells us about him verses 19 to 24. Now we know a lot about Timothy from other parts of the New Testament. We know that Paul was instrumental in his conversion. Paul pastored him, Paul mentored him, he trained him, but he trusted him. He actually says in this section, I'm sending Timothy to you as an encouragement and on a fact-finding mission because I've got no one like him. He really is unique, and especially because of his genuine concern for your welfare. He really will be an asset to you. He'll be a blessing to you. He will encourage you, and if any problems need to be sorted out, he has the pastoral experience to be able to help. And we know there were problems in Philippi. We know that from chapter 4. There'd been a dispute that needed sorting out, and Timothy was the ideal man to send back to Philippi. Paul treated him as a son with a father in the gospel. And he tells us in verse 22, he's a man of proven worth. Paul had worked side by side with him. He'd watched him. He'd admired him. And he had no doubts that Timothy would not let him, Paul, down. He wouldn't let the church down, and he wouldn't let the Lord down. Now, there's so much we could say about Timothy, but I'm actually going to leave it there because I want to bring to your attention another man who Paul talks about in this section, Epaphroditus. Strange name, nightmare for grandparents, far too long. How do you fit that on a birthday card? How am I supposed to remember that? But it's a great name, and he's a great man. Epaphroditus has come from Philippi to Rome with a gift. The church in Philippi were concerned about Paul's situation in house arrest. They knew he would need some support. They knew he'd need financial help, and they entrusted Epaphroditus with a substantial gift. That in itself says a lot. But when we come across Paul's references to him, verses 25 to 30, we see what an outstanding man Epaphroditus was. Verse 25, Paul says he's my brother, my fellow worker, fellow soldier, messenger, and minister. Brother. No pecking order, no superiority by Paul. He's a brother. A fellow worker. He's got stuck in. A fellow soldier. Shoulder to shoulder in the battle. A messenger. He'll go on commissions. He's a minister to my need. He's brought me that gift. 800 miles, by the way, from Philippi to Rome. A long way, an arduous journey. And when we realise, looking at the rest of this little section, that Epaphroditus has been very ill, so ill that he almost died, we realise what an amazing feat that was to actually make it from Philippi to Rome. But while he'd been on the journey, Epaphroditus had found something out. Because he'd been ill, the church in Philippi were worried about him. And then Epaphroditus started worrying that the church was worrying about him. All sounds complicated, but it simply shows us Epaphroditus had a very sensitive nature, a very caring nature. He didn't want the church in Philippi to worry about him. And Paul's going to send him back so that when they see him, they can rejoice. They can, in fact, verse 29, receive him with all joy and give him honour, which he certainly deserves because of the sort of man that he is. Now let's just go back to verse 25. What a reference this is. From Paul himself. Wouldn't you like to receive a reference that put your name there is a brother or a sister, fellow worker, fellow soldier, messenger, minister? Paul knew when people had let him down. We find that from other letters. Epaphroditus hadn't, and he wouldn't. He had every faith in him that he would do what he was asked to do. Now think about it. Timothy's going to go back 800 miles to encourage the church in Philippi. Epaphroditus has come 800 miles to encourage Paul, and he's going to go back another 800 miles in order to encourage the church and relieve their fears and their anxieties. Boy, what a trio when you think as well of all that Paul endured in his life, in his ministry, and on his missionary journeys. Brothers in arms, these three, real friends. Challenge. Here's the question. What sort of a friend, what sort of a colleague are you and I? Trustworthy, like Epaphroditus with the gift, an encourager, especially like Timothy, but like both of them, willing to go the extra mile, to be a messenger, a minister, to be a real brother or sister to those in need. Paul had very difficult circumstances so many times in life. House arrest was certainly no fun, but rather than worrying about his own situation, rather than wallowing in self-pity, he registered for all time how good these colleagues were, but also was more concerned about them and the encouragement to the church in Philippi than anything about his own circumstances. Could you be like that? Could I be like Timothy, like Epaphroditus, like Paul? There was a song not many years ago, "There is joy in the journey." There was joy in Paul's journey, arduous though it was. There was joy in Timothy's journey, arduous though it was from Rome to Philippi. There was joy in Epaphroditus' journey from Philippi to Rome to Philippi. There's joy in serving Jesus. Are we men and women like that? Stickability can be relied upon, can be effective, can be a blessing to others. I trust this little passage, those little pen pictures, will be a challenge to all. Certainly have been to me.